speaking today on finding and evaluating generic market entry opportunities. And I really look forward to the discussion around this. It dovetails really well with, unfortunately, I only saw half the talks yesterday, but the three talks that I did see were fantastic, and they all touch on the topics which I'll be going over again. It's always great to go first because then you don't have to repeat what anyone else said. So going first on the second day, I'm very happy to be talking to you all, but I'm going to try not to over elaborate on the things which have already been discussed. But yet we'll be going over these topics, and I think, as we saw, there's a lot of pain being felt in the generic and brand side industries right now to do with supply chains, but also downstream, simply who's buying what because of COVID. And it's one of these things where you had an industry which was already in trouble and is now in more trouble because of COVID. And we'll go over some of the things which I think would be wise to think about in accommodating all of this. I would encourage you to drop chat messages in while I'm talking. I tend to talk quickly and blaze right through my slides, even in a live presentation. Now that I'm sitting in my office talking to my computer, I'm only more likely to do it. So I have a second screen up. I can see your chats if they do come up while I'm talking. And we're going over five different topics today. The last topic we'll be going over is, it came up in a workshop I gave at a pharmacide conference, a brand side conference with Marcus Evans 6 months ago, about how to manage decision-making within your organizations. It's far more critical for brand side companies because they're just so large that you need a lot of people to be aligned on the same objectives. But I think it resonated well, and I think the same messaging can be applied to generic firms, large and small. So I'll be going over those five topics. The fifth one being keeping your team aligned on it. It aligns really well with what Robert was saying yesterday about strategy and your goals. So along those topics, there's not a bullet point on it, but we'll get to it at the end, assuming we have time. So because we're going over these five different topics, feel free to pop in at any time with a question, and then I can address that question before we get to the end, and then it's going to be out of context. So what we saw George talking about yesterday, hope I have the right names there. Yes, George was talking about paragraph 4. He had a ton of data on paragraph 4's. I don't see the same decrease in paragraph 4 filings or paragraph 4 success, because I cut off about a year or two before he did. But this is a collaboration I did with Bloomberg, where they wanted to show that there's too many companies filing for paragraph 4s, which was basically depleting the opportunity. And I didn't have the budget to have 8 slides up. I had 2 figures I could use with Bloomberg, so I had to come up with the most succinct way to demonstrate that there's more companies filing for paragraph 4s. And so what you see here is this first chart just shows over the years the number of drugs where you have more than one filing, and there's an increase in that. But you can actually really amplify that by showing how many drugs have 10 filers or more. When you have maybe 2 filers on a drug, it's not going to be that stressful for each of the 2 filers. It'd be ideal if the first paragraph 4 first filer had market exclusivity on their own. If you have to share it, you end up with 50% each, probably a little bit less because the 2 are in competition with each other. But when you have 10 filers fighting for paragraph 4, essentially no one wins. And it just means that the opportunity may be dying. Like you see, probably 15 years ago, everyone was worried about the patent cliffs. If you could just find out when generic drugs were could enter, when patents expired, you would enter those markets and get a share of them. And over time, that strategy became obsolete. And so likewise, those changes in how the FDA interpreted who was a first day filer, they used to use security cameras to find out who was the first one to the office, but then people were camping outside the office, and they just said everyone who's on the first day is a first day filer, which is how you end up with 10, 15, 25 companies being first day filers. And it doesn't do anyone any service for 25 companies to share market exclusivity. There effectively is no market exclusivity when you have 24 competitors. So generic competition is increasing, but at the same time, there's a really strong benefit to being the first mover. This is a study, it's a couple of years old. I don't have the date, but I have the rest of the citation down here, showing that the generic first mover, the first entrant to the market, can enjoy an 80% market share over the second entrant, and it can last for many years. And the reason is because once suppliers have a connection with the generic company, there's really not a ton of motivation for them to shift. The cost per unit is not the only factor. Simply switching suppliers means that you have to inventory two different drugs, which can be expensive. And if you have a ton of drugs in your portfolio, if you're always rebalancing, it might just be more trouble than it's worth. So being the first to market, establishing these relationships can end up with enduring benefits. But like I said, when you have 25 companies rather fighting for first filer status, who's going to win? It's simply a coin toss. And so it's time to start rethinking how it is that that you want to enter the market and where it makes sense. So I'll just go over a couple of the tactics that you can use to find market entry opportunities as early as possible. One of them is simply looking through the Orange Book. We have a list, the URL is posted at the bottom. It's posted on the net. It's available for free. What we do is we take a look at all of the patents covering any given drug. And it's a simple algorithm. You look for litigated patents. You look for patents containing the word compound in the claims, things like that, and try to figure out for all of these drugs with more than one patent, which is likely to be the dominant patent. And from there, of course, you can refine it. You throw it over the fence to your legal department. But it's a useful way to project out what will be expiring in what years. So you can start looking at the landscape and thinking about how you want to stack rank your portfolio opportunities, and then look at all the other factors, such as strategic alignment and ROI and everything else. We have a workshop on that this afternoon. That you can stack rank those opportunities and find out which ones are worth pursuing. Then taking a step back, getting, I guess, more aggressive, taking a look at NCE -1 dates. And this, of course, it's standard fare, but we have a list posted as well. It's you cannot challenge a patent in less than 5 years, 4 years, 5 years -1, after a new chemical entity has been launched, because it takes a while for that litigation to settle. So you can rather challenge 1 year before that 5-year period. And so taking a look at those drugs gives you a larger list of drugs, because rather than simply looking at patent expirations, you can make that patent effectively expire by challenging that patent. And so looking at the NCE -1 dates also gives you another complementary list of all the drugs that you can be putting on your portfolio opportunities lists to then be evaluating and looking at. And then you have to add the additional factor, of course, of what is the likelihood that you're going to win in litigation. But as we'll be going over is it in this morning or this, well, we'll see soon enough, certain brand side companies are going to be more aggressive in the tactics which they use to make it less advantageous for generics to challenge patents through things like authorized generics and what have you. And so it's another factor to bring in, is not just will you win the litigation, but also how will the brand react should you prevail in litigation, and will it be the sort of a brand that's not the sort of company which you'd want to find yourself against, fighting for authorized generic versus generic sales. And we'll go over that later on. The other place to look, if you don't want to get involved in litigation, is to simply see who else is working on litigation. Because when patents are challenged, they may fall, and then you end up with earlier than anticipated generic entry opportunities. And so it's always good to keep a tab on not just then the organic patent expiration dates and the opportunities to challenge patents, but also when the patents may end up falling, because that will create yet another opportunity to enter the market. The last category here, this came up recently. There's a paper trying to study how generic firms made their decisions. And one of the factors was product-specific guidances. For complex generics, turns out that when the FDA issues product-specific guidance, and there's an example right here, the URL is down on the bottom of your page, where the FDA literally says, this is the study we would like to see for approval of this generic, because it's not happening fast enough. So with this guidance from the FDA, that's often the trigger for generic companies to say, let's go ahead and follow the product specific guidance, because that gives you a straighter path towards getting generic approval. And so that's yet another thing to look at for figuring out your generic entry opportunities. So with that on just a broad overview of some of the common ways that you can find your generic entry opportunities, we're going to be moving on to the next topic, which is how you enter with avoiding litigation. Taking a look to see if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'll just move forward. Great. So there's three broad ways that you can avoid litigation. This is it's common. So larger generic companies obviously have the resources to engage in aggressive litigation and enjoy the benefits of being first movers. But if you don't have that capacity, or if you're simply trying to patch a hole in your pipeline, you have a temporary opportunity to expand your portfolio. What else can you do with minimal cost and short-term gains? I'm not saying that in a bad way, but when you have a short-term window in your portfolio, how do you enter the market now instead of waiting 2 years for litigation? One way is to try to work around patents, and so that's our favorite, the 505(b)(2). 505(b)(2)s are not just about amendments to drugs. Common 505(b)(2)s are changing a dosage form. So you take an orally dosed drug, you make it a transdermal drug for patients who have trouble swallowing, or maybe a liquid form, or you swap out lactose for something else. But you can also change manufacturing methods. And so if a drug no longer has compound patents per se, but the patents are on the manufacturing method, maybe you can find a way around that. Another example is something like the EpiPen, where the price went up and the patents were not on epinephrine, the patents were on the pen, were on the auto-injector. So yet again, a 505(b)(2) is a relatively rapid way to enter that market. You don't have to deal with the patents on the drug itself. You just have to deal with the manufacturing or delivery methods. And if you can work around those patents, you can get on the market faster than otherwise. Another super popular way is simply day 181 launch. For companies that don't want to have to deal with patent litigation, both the expense of it, but also the uncertainty of being able to launch after that, you simply wait till someone else has 6 months of exclusivity for having defeated a patent. And on day 181, you can go ahead and launch. And then you know that there's going to be other entrants, but you know that you'll be able to enter the market simply because there will be no more patents left on that drug. And so you'll be sharing the market, but at least you'll be on that market. And the other two categories here, I pulled off the DESI drugs simply because I don't know if those are really being pursued as aggressively anymore. But it's like someone mentioned this yesterday. I think it was Robert. That looking back at your portfolio and rebalancing it, maybe it was George, and rebalancing your portfolio and saying, what are the drugs we used to have on market for which there's now opportunities for whatever reason? But also you can look at any time at drugs where there's either off-patent drugs with one source or two sources perhaps. For whatever reason, no one else is on that market and there's no patent stopping you. It could be the market size is too small, or it could just be that there's a gap, a temporary gap in the market. And if you enter that, fill that gap, now there's going to be two sources, so there's less incentive for others to enter. But also off-patent drugs with no active sources. So they're effectively discontinued. There might be a need on the market, but once again, there's a temporary gap in the market. If you can fill that gap, then you make it less appealing for anyone else to enter that market. And so you can have effective exclusivity on a small market simply by identifying it, finding it, and entering it before anyone else does. And like was mentioned yesterday, some of these drugs might be drugs you already have the capacity to make. You might even have a shelved ANDA on it. So it's just a matter of reviving it and building out your diversity of your revenue stream. So the next topic I want to go over is packaging as differentiation. Obviously, a lot of this you see on the brand side, but I think there's opportunities for generic side to use some of these strategies as well. If there's no questions on the last set, I'll move forward to this one. So here's a screenshot from Reddit. I wanted to, it's not the cleanest photo, but I wanted to show it because it has 588, at the time I grabbed the screenshot, 588 upvotes on Reddit. This is subreddit where pharmacists chat with each other, and they said this 365 count bottle of Allegra is literally it makes good sense. It's the first time they'd ever seen it. And so, a lot of people take allergy medicine seasonally, but if you make it a 365 tablet bottle, you're effectively encouraging all year use without putting that on the label. The label might prevent you from saying that you should use it all year, but the 365 is a rather conspicuous number, and so it encourages people then to take it all year round. You might end up doubling or tripling the number of scripts you're selling, and certainly if you're partnered up with a CVS or any other pharmacy, they they'd love to sell more larger bottles, of course, if they can. And so simply having a 180 pill bottle versus selling people a 365 pill bottle is going to be favorable to the retailer. So it's one way that you can outcompete other options and also sell more pills at the same time. And this one's actually a generic side. It's can't say Allegra, the generic name, but it's this is a generic side example. This next one, well, this is Allegra. It's a brand side, but this is designed to capture point of sale. It sits right beside the cash register. It's packaged up, right at your 7-Eleven on the way out. Someone's suffering allergy symptoms one day, maybe they went in for something else to a convenience store, and right there on the counter is Allegra. They're like, oh, I got a sniffly nose, something like that. Let me just grab an Allegra, and they're off. So the retailer likes it. You get placement right there, and just packaging it up like this in these blister packs is yet another way to compete against all the other generics out there or all the other options out there. So it's yet another way to get advantageous positioning and simply close the deal. Another one is serving market segments. So here we have, I believe arthritis caps are pretty common across the board, but for some populations, people with arthritis, if they have the choice between any drug out there and one of them has their arthritis cap, that's the one they're going to choose. They might even choose, let's say, Tylenol versus naproxen simply because it has the cap, even if it's Tylenol is a different category, but let's say ibuprofen versus naproxen, they might choose the one with the cap that they can open better, even though it's not the one that they would otherwise regularly take. The last example I have here is drug label, which it's got this built-in calculator on it. So when you're trying to figure out what dosage you have for children, they have based on the weight of the child, 2 different size ranges. You twist the bottle, and it simply does the math for you, so you can calculate how to dose the drugs. This, unlike aligning with the retailer, it actually aligns with the caregiver, and the caregiver might prefer to buy the drug with this label because it gives them a leg up. And you don't even have to necessarily do it on the label. You can just do it on the outside of the packaging, a paper insert, what have you. But it's just the general theme here of all these changes in packaging are, aside from changing the label on the drug, which you can't do, and aside from changing what the drug is, which you can't do because it's a generic drug, it's the same as all the other generic drugs on the market, what are all the other ways that you can differentiate the drug? And I really should have put up a slide here for the EpiPen because that was a great example. Epinephrine was off patent. The auto-injector is where the value was. And so you could build a franchise around auto-injecting. I don't know how many other drugs are eligible for auto-injecting, but you could build a franchise around your delivery mechanism that you'd have to 505(b)(2) it rather than the compound itself. And there's an example, actually I bring it up in the workshop this afternoon, Abraxas, specialized in pegylating drugs to increase their half-life in the blood. And Abraxas is no longer around. They sold out for $2.99 billion. And so they built a franchise off of differentiating from other generic drugs, and they end up getting bought by Celgene. So they did it phenomenally well. That's the bottom line here, is how do you differentiate yourself from the other generics without changing? Well, Abraxas did change the compound, but only trivially. They didn't have to develop novel molecules. They just had to keep on 505(b)(2) and other drugs. The last section here I want to talk about is, it's not the last section, I'm sorry. Last section is going to be on strategy. The next section is on partnering with brands. And it's another way to build affinity, but also to differentiate yourself from the other generics on the market. And so the common element here, the common angle rather here, is authorized generic, but we're going to dive a bit deeper than simply partnering up with brands. the reason why I wanted to mention this is because it's not just a matter of knocking on someone's door saying, we want to sell your authorized generic. What I've been hearing a lot of generic companies do when they partner with a brand as an authorized generic is that they provide them with a lot of strategic guidance on how to price the brand in response to everything else which is happening in the market. So it's not necessarily, lockstep the authorized generic changing price alongside the brand, but rather as a generic manufacturer, you have a lot of experience understanding how the generic market operates. And so for the right to sell the authorized generic, you can then help the brand navigate changes as more and more generics enter the market. You can help them understand what that's going to mean for their brand and help them with the market projections or even with their strategies in response. So it's almost like a consultative agreement, and the payment you get is the right to sell the authorized generic. I wanted to put the slide up. I was trying to find a easy way to explain what an authorized generic is without pulling the boilerplate off the FDA's website. So I went to Costco's website, and they have this great little drawing that shows how the brand name and the authorized generic are the same drug. And they say it right up top. It's the brand company's own product repackaged, comes off the exact same line, and they try to drive a wedge saying that the generic drug is bioequivalent. And they use all the right languages off the FDA's website. But if you ever found yourself having to explain to someone the difference between an authorized generic and a regular generic, I think this page from Costco is absolutely fantastic. So here actually is the Abraxas example. I thought it was in the workshop this afternoon, but it's right here. So they built a platform, a pegylation platform. And the question is, what other platforms can you build around 505(b)(2) expertise? They started off with Taxol. There's a picture here of paclitaxel, which is pegylated. Taxol was a nasty drug to dose simply because of the caustic properties. Had to use castor oil to solubilize it. Nasty side effects, burns at the site of injection. By pegylating the drugs, they removed a lot of those problems, but also extended the half-life of the drug. And in the end, they got bought by Celgene, like I said before, for $2.9 billion. And so they started off as effectively a generic company improving generic drugs, but ended up going brand side. So it's a fantastic success story. This afternoon, I have actually got I'll just flip through my slides, make sure I'm not getting myself wrong. No, the slides are coming up now on some of the other generic side strategies. So this is the example I wanted to bring up. This is a lot of fun to put together. Ro and Pfizer. Ro started off as Roman Health. They were selling Sildenafil. And the thing which I want to show about Sildenafil, I'm going to flip forward 2 slides, is if you take a look at how people buy Viagra versus Sildenafil, you see that the vast majority of mail order sales are done by Viagra. Same thing with Nexium. When you have drugs with strong branding, the mail order sales, when patients have a choice about which drug they're buying, they're generally going to want to buy the branded drug. When they're going through a formulary, as you see in the yellow wedge on the right side, they're getting Sildenafil because they're getting whatever the formulary will give them. And you see that a tiny sliver of the generic side sales are mail order. So the question is, how do you dominate? How do you actually sell Sildenafil if you don't want to compete on price, right? The mail order market's a really lucrative market. And that's where Ro started. They started off as Roman Health selling Sildenafil. And so they branded it. They called it Roman Health. And so it wasn't just Sildenafil coming through, even though it was. But they put their own branding on the outside. So more recently, they've been moving to become a fully integrated telehealth provider. They had a recent partnership with Pfizer where Ro was getting access to Pfizer's generic division to sell Greenstone cholesterol and hypertension drugs. Pfizer then gains access to Ro's user base who are taking these who have cholesterol conditions and other hypertension-related conditions. And so the benefit is that Pfizer can then use this population for clinical trials or to upsell to other drugs. But presumably people who are taking these generic drugs, some of them might want to engage in a clinical trial on a new cholesterol-reducing drug. And so because Pfizer has access to this larger population through Ro, then they can target those people, say, we're working on a new drug. Do you want to hop on the trial? So it might then end up accelerating Pfizer's clinical trials. And clinical trials for a blockbuster drug are worth a fortune if you can just reduce it by a day or a week or a month. And so enhancing recruitment can be very, very useful. So for Pfizer, it they're selling generic drugs anyways to compete with all the other generics. If they can do it more aggressively, not only do they make it less favorable for any generic company to compete with Pfizer, because that Pfizer might end up using a strategy like this, but they can also get the benefit of helping the brand side of the house by being able to tap into this population of generic users. And so that's all summarized on this slide right here, the benefits which Pfizer gets from Ro. The flip side, though, is that Ro gets quite a bit as well. Ro looks to be positioned themselves as a telehealth provider. So Sildenafil is routinely prescribed over the internet. So they can then partner either in-house. I don't know if you have to draw a line between being a pharmacy and a telehealth provider, but nonetheless, they can either partner with externally or internally telehealth providers so that it's the place you go when you need, either your cholesterol checked over the internet. You have to go to, local LabCorp to get your test done, but then someone over the internet is going to be prescribing you Lipitor or prescribing you Sildenafil if that's routinely prescribed over the net. And so they can simply shop around for every drug which can be prescribed over the internet and keep on adding that to their portfolio, and they become a powerhouse. And just to highlight what they've done, they just raised funding at a $5 billion valuation. So they're absolutely killing it. They're doing phenomenally well. And I mentioned before, building a platform around, pegylation, building a platform around an auto injector pen, building a platform around unique packaging, and Ro is building a platform around telehealth, just finding all the drugs that you can telehealth and adding them to their portfolio. And on top of it, they're focusing on authorized generics. And so if you tell patients, like the Costco slide, that we're not selling generics, we're selling authorized generics, it's yet another leg up. And the benefit, of course, of the brand side to allow Ro to sell these authorized generics is all those benefits I mentioned up front with access to the patient population for clinical trials. It's just it's a really neat partnership. And at this point, telehealth, it might be that window might be rapidly shrinking, but it's worth taking a look at your operations and the industry dynamics and saying, what else can we do? What other opportunities are out there? Just like the paragraph 4s look to be drying up and telehealth looks to be really well subscribed. What are the other things that can be done to build a powerhouse to really differentiate yourself from other generic competitors out there? So Ro falls into the category effectively of branded generics, but I'll bring up another example. And so a branded generic, they fall into a couple of different categories. I have this slide here. I won't go into great detail, but basically a branded generic can either be an ANDA generic with a new sticker on the outside, or it can be a 505(b)(2) where you're changing the drug, just like I can't remember what Abraxane was paclitaxel. So Abraxis gave the generic their own name. Here's an example I like to bring up. It's Abbott split their company in half. Abbott has a fantastic name, so they started selling branded generics in ex-US markets. And so if I can't remember if this is Kazakhstan or Ukraine, but in some countries, you simply can't trust the drugs you're buying from domestic brands. And so if you're buying vitamin pills, how do you know it's not contaminated? If it comes from Abbott, you can trust it. So simply by putting the Abbott brand on vitamin pills, vitamin gummy bears for kids, people who have the wherewithal are going to buy the Abbott brand versus some other brand which has which they trust less. I just want to put the slide back up again. If you want to tackle these narrow markets like the mail order market, you really have to differentiate. Otherwise, you're simply fighting on price. And so using something like a branded generic can help you differentiate. And here is the example I wanted to show, which is Hims. They're following in the trail of Roman Health, which is now Ro. And so they sell Cialis or Sildenafil for erectile dysfunction. I haven't checked their website recently, but for a while, they were actually doing something which no one else could do. They were making health claims on their website. Because they were selling more than one drug for each indication, they were able to make health claims because they weren't tying the health claims to any one drug. I'm not sure if that got shut down. I'm sure that, it seems likely that it would get shut down, but nonetheless, they're going after all these categories. And so they do have a little blue pill here. So you get a sense for what you're getting, but when patients buy into Hims, they're buying this whole portfolio. So, as you're aging, you're looking at hair loss, you're looking at skincare, anxiety, depression. Why not just throw it in there? Because that can also be diagnosed over the internet. And so what are all the things that once you get someone in on the platform, you just keep on selling them across the brand? You have this portfolio. No one knows. I don't know. Take a look at my allergy medicine here. It comes from Spirit Pharmaceuticals. That's not I'm not going to go buy that brand preferentially over when I buy allergy meds, but it is possible to try to build a brand around a common theme, and that's what Hims is working on, and Ro's clearly successfully done. So the last module before we move forward is on strategy. This, like I said, it comes from the workshop 6 months ago on the brand side, where you're managing much larger teams. But I think it's a really useful way to keep yourself aligned. Drug Patent Watch actually does operate on OKRs, objectives and key results. But it's also useful for your teams. And in light of everything I've said here about how to try to tackle market opportunities, just so that you're sure, you can be sure that you're working towards a consistent goal. It's useful to have a framework to say, like, what is my overall objective? And how can I make sure that all the things that I'm doing drive towards a common objective rather than a scattershot or distributed approach, just to make sure that everything's pushing in the same direction. So so before I get into OKRs, the best book on it is called Measure What Matters. And it's John Doerr's example of how they introduced OKRs at Intel. OKRs have since been used at Google, other companies. And the real advantage of OKRs, the reason why they're so powerful, is because you can have an entire company understand what their objective is. If it's something like, we want to put a man on the moon, then everyone knows that my objective is to put a man on the moon. But in order to put a man on the moon, you need to build a rocket. In order to build a rocket, you need to do all these other things. And so the example from the book is a football team. It's an American conference based in Philadelphia, so I'll say football. But for those of you with ex-US interests, you can call it American football. It's not soccer, it's American football. So the objective for the team general manager is he or she has to make money for the owners, otherwise they will be replaced. So how do you make money for the owners, right? That is your objective, is to make money for the owners. The two key results that you hypothesize will take you there are winning the Super Bowl and also filling the stands to an arbitrary number, 88%. The importance of putting a number on is that way when you've achieved your key result, right? You've won the Super Bowl because you had more points. You've filled the stand sufficiently when you've hit 88%. And so when you hit that key result, then you can assess whether or not it actually helped you hit your objective. The value of these key results is that every team can take those key results and say, how do we accomplish this key result? So it becomes the objective of the lower down team. So the head coach can say, if I want to win the Super Bowl, because public relations can't win a Super Bowl, just like the head coach can't fill stands. So the head coach says, I want to win the Super Bowl, which means I need, we take a look at how much passing we're doing. Maybe we need to pass the ball further, make more advances on offense, improve the defense. And so try to rank, it's an objective measure, rank third in the runnings against other teams on how good your defense is. A whole bunch of objective metrics, which then become the key results, which you think will help you win the Super Bowl. And PR, likewise, what are the things that we can do to try to help fill the stands? So it's 3 colorful players, not one or not more colorful players. And you can even try to quantify what is a colorful player. 2 Monday night games, so try to get more high popularity games and things like that. We don't need to delve into the details, but so each department then would take the objectives, the key results from the department above them, make it their key results, and then drive more underneath it. And then individuals can even say, offense says, well, we can't fill the stands, we can't obviously help with that defense, but we can try to work on 200 yards of passing, which means we have to have more pass completions. Defense, they can work on being ranked first in defense, third rather than defense. So how do they do that? They quantify how much progress the opposing team can make. So they objectively measure the defense. So the benefit of OKRs is it can trickle all the way down through the organization. So if you, let's say I want to have, X number of drugs with more than $100 million in annual revenues, everyone in the company can look at that and say, how can we all drive towards that goal by having the OKRs trickle all the way down? And that's it for my presentation. I have a book here which goes over a lot of the different topics we discussed. We've had clients passed around to everyone on their team, even if they're not engaged in portfolio management and generic selection, simply because it helps them understand, if you're charged with manufacturing or something like that, you might not understand the importance of patents and loss of exclusivity dates and why things are changing around the way they are. So people do hand it around to their teams so that everyone is on the same page and understands how the industry operates. And so I'm more than happy to send a PDF around. Just ask me for a copy. And with that, I think we have 10 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you, Yali, for this very interesting presentation and giving us insights about the market and partnering with brands and so on. Before we go into the Q&A, I would love to put your evaluation live to get some feedback from the audience to your presentation. And let me check. There is no questions so far, but yeah, as we okay, it's coming. They need time to type.
And I do
when Young wants,
yeah,
there is the first one. You see it by yourself, or shall I will read it out to everybody.
I just want to say about the feedback that this is my third time at this conference, and so the feedback helped really drive this presentation forward. It's questions were asked. I said, let me do my best to answer those questions. And so the feedback is really, really important to having a better talk going forward. So I really do appreciate it. And so I see the question here. It seems that authorized generics are a no-brainer for big pharma. What are their challenges and downside to prevent them in doing so? It's a good question. I think that the game is to try to partner with big pharma to become the preferred provider for their authorized generic. It could be that at some point someone's going to construe authorized generic as being anti-competitive. So you could run down that angle and try to convince the marketplace that authorized generics are non-competitive. You're rarely going to beat them on price, but perhaps you can beat them on service or something else. And so, like I showed in probably one of the first 5 slides, the first generic entrant can have preferential position in the marketplace for a long time. And so if you can become a better partner to your downstream vendors, the wholesalers, the pharmacies, whatever else, it's difficult for a generic to do. But once again, it comes right back to how does one generic company differentiate itself from every other generic company? And so same strategies that can help you differentiate from other generics can help you differentiate from authorized generics. I know that payers prefer authorized generics because they know exactly what's coming down, what's coming out of that bottle. They know that the quality is the exact same quality as the brand. But I think it comes down to, unlike biosimilars, where you can actually have a slightly different product. For small molecules, my first sense would be trying to focus on service, just out-service your clients in a way that no one else can do. Good question.
Okay, thank you, Ali. I don't know if you see the Zoom chat as well. There's a question from Rosario. He's already joined here because he's the next speaker. I can read it for you. Yeah, Rosario writes, great talk, Yali. May you please elaborate on probability of success for each segment in the football analogy and parallel to the CX? For example, 3 blocked punts maybe have a low POS.
Probability of success. So the thing about OKRs is that you don't even know if winning the Super Bowl is going to make you more money. In fact, it could also be that the cost of winning the Super Bowl, of doing all the things which you have to do, hiring all the people, won't make you more money. Your profits and your costs could go up, and so you might end up with less profits at the end of the day. It's all a hypothesis. But the advantage, the the reason to have these OKRs is that they allow you to structure, and then you reevaluate. It's all described in John's book. Ideally, you have 3 OKRs with objective metrics, and you want to achieve 2 of the 3. If you achieved all 3, it meant that your goals were too easy. And if you didn't achieve 2 of them, it means your goals were too hard. And so the hack is that at Intel and Google, they found that people were making 2 really easy goals and 1 impossible one, so that they always would get 2 out of 3. And so the point is that, like every system, it can be hacked and it can have flaws. But the benefit of the system is not the fact that you're accomplishing 2 out of 3 OKRs, or that your key results are necessarily going to lead to the objective. It's that it gives you, it's right in the title, measure what matters. By measuring these things and by seeing if they're having the outcome that you want, it allows you to keep on adjusting it over time, rather than waking up every Monday morning and saying, what are we going to do this week? And so it gives you, ideally, something like a 6-month objective to run against. And at the end of the 6 months, you reevaluate and say, has this worked for us? And if not, let's develop a new 6-month series of objectives and drive forward with that. Really good question.
Thank you, Yali. Yeah, he replies, okay, thank you. So I think that's the answer he wanted to have.